The Hulk movie tie-in game from 2003 is one of those titles I've somehow played through quite a few times over the years, and that still manages to be an absolute blast despite all its flaws. What I think makes it stand out from other licensed games released around the same time is that it doesn't simply retell the events of the film it's portraying. Instead, a decision was made to set the game's plot a year after the movie, effectively creating a sequel and giving Radical Entertainment the opportunity to introduce some classic Hulk villains like the Leader and Ravage into the mix. It was actually quite refreshing because it felt like the developers were trying to create something for both fans of the movie and fans of the comics rather than just recreating scenes from the film. But the one thing that always stood out to me the most, both as a kid and now replaying it as an adult, is just how well the game captures the fantasy of being the big man himself. From the moment you're dropped into the first level, the game encourages you to cause as much destruction as possible. Environments tremble around you, vehicles explode into pieces, and soldiers can be launched across the map as you leave a trail of chaos in your wake. It was quite clear that Radical Entertainment understood the assignment of knowing exactly what players would want from a Hulk game. They weren't trying to create a deep RPG or a complex action experience, they simply wanted players to feel like the strongest thing on the planet. And for the most part, they absolutely succeeded. The game's combat is fairly simple, but it's incredibly satisfying. Hulk can punch, kick, jump, throw objects, pick up environmental weapons, and unleash a variety of powerful attacks against anything unfortunate to stand in his way. One thing I never got tired of was being able to grab enemies directly. Whether you're throwing them into the distance or repeatedly slamming them into the ground, it's one of those features that perfectly captures Hulk's brute force nature and somehow remains entertaining throughout the entire game. Another feature I really enjoyed was the rage meter. As Hulk takes and deals damage, his rage increases, making him even more powerful and eventually allowing him to unleash a devastating special attack, adding yet another layer to the power fantasy and making you feel even more unstoppable during encounters. Something else that surprised me was just how good Hulk's movements still feel. Every jump, punch and landing carries a real sense of weight behind it, with animations doing an excellent job of selling the idea that you're controlling a massive creature capable of leveling entire areas. Graphically, the game has also aged astoundingly well. The cel-shaded visuals give it a timeless comic book aesthetic that helps it look far better than many licensed games released around the same time. Combined with the exaggerated animations and larger-than-life action, it remains visually distinctive even today. Another pleasant surprise were the game's boss fights. While many of the regular missions boil down to smashing your way from one objective to the next, the bosses often force you to approach encounters differently. Half-Life, for example, requires you to make use of environmental objects rather than simply punching your way to victory, while Madman can be fought more directly but still demands that you pay attention to his attack patterns. These colossal clashes helped break up the campaign and ended up being some of my favourite moments in the game. Of course though, this movie tie-in isn't without its flaws. The biggest issue for me being the lack of progression. Most of Hulk's moves are available from the very beginning, meaning you've already seen most of what the combat system has to offer within the first few missions. While the combat remains enjoyable, it can start to feel repetitive during longer play sessions. Then there are the infamous Bruce Banner stealth sections. On one hand, these missions help break up the constant destruction and provide some variety throughout the campaign. On the other hand, however, they temporarily remove the very thing most people were here for in the first place.
And Hulk. Smash.
The earlier stealth sections are relatively straightforward, but some of the later ones require a fair amount of patience and trial and error, and a few of them definitely outstay their welcome. The mission design itself is also fairly simple. Most objectives revolve around getting from one location to another while surviving wave after wave of enemies. Soldiers, tanks, robots, and mutant creatures are constantly thrown at the player, and while they rarely pose much of a challenge individually, they can become overwhelming when they attack in large numbers. One particular annoyance comes from enemies equipped with anti-air weaponry. Anyone who's played this game will probably remember being knocked out of the sky while attempting one of Hulk's enormous jumps, and no pun intended, but it can really put you in a pickle.
I'm Pickle Rick!
Looking back on it now, I think the Hulk movie tie-in game succeeded because it never lost sight of what it wanted to be. It wasn't trying to reinvent the action genre or tell an emotionally complex story, it simply wanted to make you feel powerful, destructive, and unstoppable. Is it repetitive? Absolutely. Do some of the stealth sections drag on longer than they should? Most definitely. But when you're smashing tanks, throwing enemies in the air, and tearing through entire environments, it's very easy to overlook some of these shortcomings. It's also interesting to look back on this game knowing what came afterwards. Many of the ideas introduced here would eventually evolve into the fantastic Hulk Ultimate Destruction and later help lay the foundation for Radical Entertainment's Prototype series. Overall though, I still think this Hulk game from 2003 is well worth revisiting. It may not be the best superhero title ever made, but few games from its era understood their character quite as well as this one did. If you don't have access to the game yourself, feel free to check out my playthrough, otherwise as always, I'll see you in the next one.